Alabama, played under Coach Bear Bryant, 1970-1972, All-American twice. Big time player, great player in college, great player in the pros. He was in the College Football Hall of Fame, inducted in 1999. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1991. Played for New England Patriots most of his career from 1973 to 1985. Pro Football Hall of Famer extraordinaire, man. On the cover of Sports Illustrated in 1981 on August 3rd as the greatest offensive lineman ever. That's how great this gentleman was. He joins me live via Zoom. Welcome to the Rashad Show, Mr. John Hanna.
Hey, I'm here.
All right. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, hello.
Yeah.
This technology's not working tonight.
Yeah. We're gonna keep, doing the interview. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for me. I appreciate it.
All right. First question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you well. I can hear you good. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. First question. Where were you born? Where you originally from?
I was born in the hospital was in Canton, Georgia, but I was actually living in a little community called Ballground, Georgia, up in North Georgia, up near the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Okay. Other than football, were there other sports that you played while you were in high school other than football? Was football your main sport that you wanted to play?
Yeah, as a youngster, I played baseball, and the only, where I grew up with, there was only three sports: football, basketball, and baseball. I tried a little bit of basketball, but they gave me 2 points when I hit the backboard. I was that bad, so I decided to stick with baseball and football. But then when I got into high school, I started wrestling. So I played football, I wrestled, and I threw the shot put discus.
Okay, other than Alabama, were there other schools that you wanted to attend? Were there other scholarships that you getting during that time when you went to Alabama? Outside of Alabama, were there other schools that reached out to you for a scholarship?
Well, there was a couple that I was really serious in. When during World War II, my mom was teaching at the University of Georgia, and matter of fact, my dad met her there when he was in OCS school, and so Georgia was very interesting to me, and because they had a great offensive line coach there at that time, and I thought that might be a good pick. And then my Uncle Bill was coaching at Cal State Fullerton, and University of Southern Cal kind of came to me a little bit through him, and I thought maybe about going out to Southern Cal and living with my Uncle Bill while I attended University of Southern California.
Okay, talk about the first time you met Coach Bear Bryant, legendary, coach, in 1970. Talk about that first encounter with great Bear Bryant.
Well, actually, the first time I ever met him was like in 1958. My Uncle Bill was at the University of Alabama playing ball when Coach Bryant came back to the university to coach. So I got to meet him when Uncle Bill was actually playing there. So I got to see him then and got to meet him. In fact, when I was in the 4th grade, I wrote a letter to Coach Bryant and said I'd like to have a football. So he sent me an old practice ball and signed it. And I don't have it now, but boy, I wish I did. But he sent me a football. So that was the first time I ever really got to know him a little bit. But then the next time I really got to meet him was, we went down for a recruitment trip my senior year in high school. and got to shake his hand and talk to him a little bit then, my senior year in high school.
Okay, so I want to know fast forward to like 1970. That's your freshman year. So the game I want to talk about was the 1970 matchup between USC and Alabama. That was a watershed moment for the South for integration. You lose that game 42-21. Sam Van Cunningham has a big game. He'll be on to be your teammate for the Patriots, but just talk about being part of that game, that watershed moment, because it really changed Bear Bryant's perspective to like integrate black players. But just talk about being part of that game in 1970.
Well, it looks, you think a lot more of it in hindsight than you did at the time. At the time, I just thought, man, we got our butts whipped. And that was all that we really kind of thought about. But when I go back and look at it, that was the first year that they'd gone to from a 10-man or a 10-game schedule to an 11-game schedule. The team that we had was basically comprised of juniors and sophomores. All the seniors had a lot of them graduated. So, it was kind of funny that all of a sudden Coach Bryant would schedule a game on the opener against Southern Cal, which was loaded that year. They had Toby Smith, John Bella. They had just had great athletes all over the place. But I do know this. It was I guess when I look back on it in hindsight and really considered it, opened up people's minds a lot. I know everybody, and I don't mean this in the wrong way, but Martin Luther King did a lot, but Sam Cunningham made people want integration. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
It was kind of forced under Johnson and Martin Luther King, but all of a sudden Sam came down there and now people wanted it. So it changed the difference in attitude about the whole thing, and they saw what a class act he was, as well as the other black athletes on that team. And it just opened up a lot of people's minds and said, hey, we need to get some more black athletes here. If we're really going to be a team, we need to have black athletes.
Okay, that first season, your first year, they really struggled. Lose 5 games, go 6-5-1. Let's talk about that freshman year. Did you play during that freshman year?
No, we weren't allowed to play as freshmen when I went to Alabama. That 70 season was my sophomore year. And it was a struggle year. It was really hard. But like I said, we were all underclassmen. We were just young and inexperienced, and we had to relearn a lot of stuff. And I think at the end of that year, Coach Bryant saw what he had as far as talent, and he changed from that kind of a single wing Houston Beer kind of a drop back game to the wishbone, and the wishbone fit our team like a glove, and our junior year proved that. We had a great running back in Johnny Musso, and Wilbur Jackson came along and played at San Francisco, and and Joe LeBou, Ellis Beck. There are just a lot of great running backs. And then our offensive line were more powerful than they were agile. So coming off the ball and hitting people, driving them off the ball, was more compatible with the talent we had on the offensive line.
Okay, so fast forward to the next season, the 71 season, you have a better year. You go 11-1, 7-0 in the SEC. You're champions of the SEC, producing Nebraska, a team that go on and win like 2 championships in a row, 71-72. You lose to them 38-6. Talk about that season, losing to Nebraska. How what that team was with Johnny Rodgers, guys like that?
Oh, it was a great team. There's no question about it. And you know, if you remember that game, most people don't remember it, but they went down and you know we hit, Coach Bryant moved me instead of playing guard, which was my usual position. He moved me out to tackle to play in front of Jacoby, and then he moved Buddy Brown into guard, and then and he made a few changes like that. So, in essence, we got the ball one time, and within 3 series, Nebraska was ahead of us 21-0. They drove down and scored. We got the ball and punted to them, and they returned it for a touchdown, and then they drove it down again for a touchdown, and it was 21-0. And Wishbone is not a team, not an offense that you can come from behind that much. And so it really, once they got ahead of us by those 3 touchdowns, you know, it just struggled. It was a rough night.
Yeah, to apologize, yeah, to the listening audience, Nebraska, that was their second championship. They won it in 1970. According to research, they won in 71 and 70, so they won back-to-back championships. So I wanted to make that correction. Going to the research, look at they won 2 times in a row in 71 and 70. Okay, so the 71 season, obviously there's a lot of history made. John Mitchell was the first to actually play. Was the black players that were playing, for University of Alabama. Let's talk about the interactions with the black athletes at that time yourself, being around, somebody that's different colored skin at that time in 71.
Nobody thought anything about it among the players. I mean, we didn't even, he was just John Mitchell. And, at that time I was married, and, we'd have people over, and John would come over, we barbecued and stuff like that. And we were all friends. And John was a good person. He was a class act. He made it easy to like him. And he was very popular. Matter of fact, we elected him captain of our team our senior year. But Wilbur was there too, and was contributing. And then the next year after Wilbur came, you got Ralph Stokes and Mike Washington and a few others. And then, it took off from there.
Okay, so let's look at the final season, the 71 team. 1972. That's the last year, 72, before you go to the NFL. You go 10-2. You're losing the Cotton Bowl to Texas. Talk about that year. Losing to Texas in the Cotton Bowl Classic.
We were 10-1, and then lost to Texas. We lost to Auburn. To be honest with you, I hate to say what I want to say because it feels like I'm making an excuse, but it's true. Coach Bryant he didn't like offense a lot. He believed in defense. And so when you would get up and get ahead of a team by maybe 14 points or something like that, he'd kind of sit on the ball and not take any chances. And so we got ahead of them like 17-3 or 16-3 is what we think. I think we were ahead of them. And then all the last 2 series, they had like 10 guys on the line of scrimmage, and we ran 3 state dive plays, which you can't make any yards when there's 10 guys up on the line. Well, and then we'd punt. Well, every time we punted, those last 2 punts, they blocked it and ran it in for a touchdown. And so, so we lost it with special teams, but in actuality, we beat their pants off, but they outscored us. So that was part of it. And then Texas, down there and played them. And it was a nip and tuck game. And at the last 2 minutes, the quarterback for Texas kept the ball and ran around, I believe, right in. And, the Alabama folks seem to remember him stepping out of bounds at the 4 or 5 yard line, but the Texas officials didn't see it that way. And they gave him a touchdown, and so they beat us in the Cotton Bowl.
Right, so now you go to the NFL, become the 4th overall pick in 1973 NFL draft. Almost 50 years, next year will be 50 years of the 73 draft. Let's talk about that draft. You're getting ready for that draft. Were you surprised? Or were you expected to be the top 4 pick? Talk about that experience.
I was surprised. You know, I didn't think offensive linemen would go that high. I thought I'd go in the first 3 rounds. I didn't think that. But I didn't think I'd be the 4th overall. And not only did I not think of it, but a lot of people made fun of Coach Bryant or Coach Fairbanks because he drafted me so high. A lot of people basically said I was too short to play in the pros, and because I was just barely 6'3", and but what most people didn't realize is I've got a 37-inch sleeve length, which means I'm one of the few guys that can scratch his ankle without bending over. So my height being a little less tall allowed me to get in under people for leverage on the run game, but my long arms helped me on pass protection so people couldn't grab me where I could get my hands in on their chest. So he saw something that most of us maybe didn't see or whatever, but I was happy about it, and I really appreciated Coach Fairbanks' confidence in me, and I hope he was satisfied that he wasted that number 4 pick on me.
Well, talk about Chuck Fairbanks. What kind of man he was? What kind of coach he was while he was there? Talk about your first interaction with Chuck Fairbanks.
Well, I'll tell you a story, and then I'll get into some of what I thought were his best qualities. When I was drafted, when I first went up to camp and all, he called in every guy and he basically asked him a question. And he says, John, what have you got in your mind for your goals as a football player in the NFL? And I said, well, I want to be a Super Bowl champion and this, that, and the other. He says, well, John, we all want that, but what do you want for yourself? And I said, well, Coach Fairbanks, I said, I've always wanted to kind of be the best guy that ever played this position. And he says, okay, what do you need to do that? And I thought about it for a little while, and I said, well, probably the biggest thing is a coach that can teach me techniques, and that'll study me and show me my mistakes, and and just teach me how to be a better ball player. He says, okay. He said, well, what do you think of your offensive line coach now? Well, I had Red Miller, and Red Miller had coached with the St. Louis Cardinals a year before, and he had sent 4 of his 5 guys to the Pro Bowl that year. So he was a great coach, a great offensive line coach. And I said, Coach, I got no problems. I said, Red's the greatest coach I've ever had. So a few years went back, and Red went to the Denver Broncos as the head coach. And Fairbanks hired another offensive line coach for a year, and he wasn't a real good coach. And he had a problem with alcohol, a few things like that. And so at the end of the year, I went into Coach Fairbanks' office, and I looked at him and I said, Coach, remember that conversation we had my rookie year about what I needed to achieve my goal? He says, I sure do. He says, what do you need to talk to him ago. I said, Coach, we need an offensive line coach bad. And he said, okay. And that was all he said. Next year I come back, and Jim Ringo, he got him from Buffalo, came to us. Jim Ringo took my game and just, it was what he taught me and showed me, and the mental aspects of the game and how to approach the game, all those different things were just more than I could expect. Jim Ringo had to be the greatest offensive line coach there ever was. And I tell you, he was great. But anyway, that's my story about Fairbanks. It kind of gives you a little indication about Coach Fairbanks never yelled, he never cussed. If he called you, here were his two word things. He said, if he called you a jackass, you know, you're a jackass. Just like that. That meant you're in real trouble. You didn't do very good. But if he ever called you a double jackass, you might as well bring your playbook because you're gone. And that's the way he was. And he was a very humble man. He did not have an ego to the point where he hired coaches who may have known more about the game than he did. And he didn't mind surrounding himself with experts, which a lot of coaches have problems with. You know, they've got to feel like they're in charge of everything and over everything, where he kind of fit in as one of them. He was the leader. He made the final decisions, but he listened. And he had a great eye for talent, not only coaching talent, like I was talking about with Jim Ringo, but he had a great eye for player talent as well. And Coach Fairbanks, in my mind, was the best head coach I ever had in my life.
Okay, so that draft, you got Sam Cunningham, yourself, Ray Hamilton, Darryl Stingley. So we had, future head coaches that were assistant coaches on the offense, Brian Earhart, mentioned Red Miller, and Sam Rutiliani. I'm saying his name right. Rutiliano. I think I'm saying his name right. But you go 5-9, during that season, finishing third place. So just the time where, that many games wasn't played, like 16 games, only 14 games played during that season. So just describe that first season, going 5-9, playing on a losing team, because you wasn't used to that when you was in college. Just talk about adjusting to like losing, in the NFL first year.
The game's different today. You can't compare then and now. Now you can come in and you can play your first year because you got talent. Back then you had to learn the game. And it took you about 3 years before you learned it. The first year you might surprise a few people because of your talent, and they hadn't seen you on film before. Your second year was your worst year. The reason why is everybody saw the film and then they knew what they could do to beat you. Then all of a sudden the third year you became a pro and you realized how you have to change up your game and what you have to do to counteract what they're doing to you. So you have to learn. And that's when a lot of people who go into the NFL and rely on talent, they won't make it past their second or third year. But people who learn the game and commit themselves to studying their position and learning technique and learning the game itself, they'll last forever because they take talent and then knowledge, they add knowledge to it. And those are the great players.
Okay, let's fast forward to 1976. That's when things really took off for the team. You go 11-3, but you lose, in the division playoffs to the Raiders. That was a very talented team. You had, yourself was an all-pro, Pro Bowler, Deion Gray, Russ Francis, who played with the 49ers, and won a Super Bowl with the 84 49ers. Mike Haynes, before he came from a Raider, he was a Patriots team. What took off? What really turned everything around? Because you wasn't playing that good the first 3 seasons. But what turned around in '76 where things just really took off? Talk about that.
happened so long ago, it's kind of hard to remember exactly what happened. But I do know um, that was the year that they moved Leon. What had happened is I was playing left guard uh, with Big Bob, who had been playing with St. Louis, and he was tutoring me. And then Leon was playing right tackle next to Lenny St. Jean, and Lenny was tutoring Leon to be an NFL tackle. Well, all of a sudden now they shifted me and Leon together over to the left-hand side. And we had Bam, we had Andy Johnson in the backfield, and Steve Grogan. I think Steve Grogan was a big part of it. So on our offense, we had a really strong, weak side running attack. And Leon was just as great a pass blocker as he was a run blocker. So we had that on offense. And then we had, Bam. I mean, when we did run right, you had Bam most of the time leading it up. And nobody's ever seen a fullback hit a guy in the mouth as hard as Bam would. I mean, he'd bang him. But anyway, we also we had, the receivers with Darryl, and we had some great receivers. But on defense, I think adding Mike Haynes at corner, and Kim Fox as a safety, free safety, really strengthened our defense dramatically, and especially against the passing attack. We'd had good offensive linemen, like you had mentioned before. We had Sugar Bear, had Tony McGee. Let's see who else was over there. Mel Lunsford. And then we had Steve Nelson, who was coming in. That would have been his second year. So we had all those guys into play, and we had we had improvement in personnel, and I think the improvement in personnel also improved our attitude. I just remembered, we got Jess Phillips. And I think this was one of the big things in a preseason game. We traded, we got Jess Phillips, who was a running back. And he primarily played special teams for us. But Jess was a character. And Jess was on the kickoff return team. And so, anyway, he's blocking this guy, and he blocks him, and he blocks him, and he blocks the guy out behind our sideline, and the guy's running. You know how everybody stands on the sideline. Well, he's running behind where everybody's lined up. And then all of a sudden he comes back out on the field, and Jess knocks him on his butt again. Well, the team starts laughing. Well, Jess stands up, and he says, "Turn off the projector." And so the coach did. And Jess says, "I don't know what you're laughing at." He said, "If I'd have been with the Raiders, that guy had never been out on the field, and I could have blocked somebody else." And all of a sudden, everybody said, "Wait a second. Maybe our attitudes need to change. Maybe we need to get a little bit more like that." And I think that was a big turning point in our team. Was when Jess stood up, kind of called us out on that.
Okay, so Chuck Fairbanks won Coach of the Year. Mike Haynes won Rookie of the Year. He ran for 2,957 yards, averaging 5 yards per carry. He was second best in the league with 376 points. And the 2,957 yards rushing was the fifth highest total in NFL history at the time. The team's 5.0 yards per carry was the best in the NFL. He remains higher than all Super Bowl champions except the 1973 Miami Dolphins. So the offense was always predicated on running the ball. Although we led the league in takeaways with 50, you were starting the league turnover differential at plus 14. So let's get to the Oakland Raiders game. That's a very controversial game. Ray Hampton, controversial roughing the passer. that was a great Raiders team. You know, they was on a mission. They had fallen short to the Steelers and stuff like that, having tough times getting over that hump. But you had them on the road. You had a chance to beat them. Talk about that. The Raiders.
Here's the real call that hurts. And nobody remembers this, and nobody even noticed it. But we ran slant 19. It was like 3rd and 2. We ran slant 19, and which was a fullback over the left side, over the left tackle. And Bam ran, and the yard marker, he went right past the yard marker and then stepped out of bounds. But the yard marker hadn't been pulled tight. So he was actually a half a yard short, so he had to punt it away, which was kind of interesting. That was had we had that yard marker been stretched, Sam would have gotten the yard, and we'd have never had to have that fast rushing call. We'd have beat him outright because we'd eaten the clock up. But that was the real thing that happened that most people never realized. But whoever was stretching the chains didn't stretch them out the way he was supposed to.
Yeah, they caught a break on that also as well, and they went on to win the Super Bowl, beat the Vikings. So 77 rolls around the next year, but you go 9-5, you didn't qualify for the playoffs. What went wrong compared to the year before in 77?
Well, I guess I've got to take some blame on that. Leon and I went to the Pro Bowl for the first time in 76. And when we got out there, Gene Upshaw came with the idea of it. At that time in a contract, you signed a contract, said you could tell other players what you made. So he came up with the idea is that we would all write what we made on a piece of paper and nobody would know who's making what. So they started pulling out and reading off the amounts, 110, 105, 106, 95, 98. And then all of a sudden out came 30 and 27.5. Well, I get back to the hotel room in San Diego, and I get a phone call from Leon. Leon says, "Which one were you?" I said, "I was 30. I said, "Which one were you?" He said, "I was 27.5. I said, "What are we going to do?" He said, "Well, Howard Slusher is here, and I think he's Sam's attorney, and I think we need to talk to him." I said, "Okay, let's go talk to him." So, in essence, we went to camp and we practiced. We played in all the preseason games, but except for the last one, we told them we were going to walk if they didn't give us a fair contract. So we walked, and that night we got a call from Fairbanks. He says, "I think we got a deal worked out. So can y'all come over to the house?" This was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I said, "Sure." So Leon and I show up, and Howard talked us to John. It's not the greatest deal in the world, but it's a deal we can live with, and I think y'all need to sign it. I said, "Okay, Howard, we'll fix it." And then all of a sudden we heard in the living room Chuck Sullivan talking to his dad. And he says, "Oh, Dad, they're going to break us. They're going to break us." And so they refused to offer us the contract even after we got there. So Leon and I walked, and they lost 3 games while we were out. So that was mine and Leon's fault.
Okay, so 78 games around this time, goes to the playoffs, 11-5, you win the division, but you lose to the Oilers, 31-14. Talk about that loss against that's when they had Earl Campbell on the Oilers, correct? Earl Campbell. Right. Talk about that loss.
Well, we 78. I'm trying to remember what happened. They just outplayed us, I think, all at once. They beat us. I mean, that was, what can you say? I mean, they just outplayed us. We made a lot of mistakes. do the things we needed to do to win, and they beat us. They just had the better team that day. That's all you can say.
Yeah, yeah, you had a great season, especially when it comes to at the time you had the then NFL record for most rushing yards in a single season, rushing for 3,165 yards on the ground. That would be broken later by the Baltimore Ravens, led by Lamar Jackson. Sam Cunningham
Yeah,
had 268 yards.
there's the difference. There's the difference.
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
Look
Running
at
back.
look at the look. They had one back that got most of that yardage.
Yeah.
We had 5 backs that had over 500 yards. Now, that you know that's a huge difference, and
Yeah.
it shows what the offensive line is. You know, we opened holes, and
Yeah.
we had a great offensive line. We had Shelby Jordan, Sam Adams, Bill and Titus, myself, and Leon, and had a couple of good other guys with Bob McKay and Pete Brock, and I mean we just had a great offensive line unit, and we opened those holes, and the backs ran and blocked. It was a very unselfish offense on the running back, very unselfish.
Yeah, even Steve Grogan had 539 yards rushing. Boys Ivory, Andy Johnson, Sam Cunningham. So 4 players rushed for more than 500 yards. So yes, you're correct. It's different from what Baltimore did. Yeah, he's definitely right on the money on that. Wait, 79 didn't make it to 97. I'm going to fast forward to 1981 because 81, before you started, he was featured on the cover of Sports Illustrated as the best offensive lineman of all time. Talk about how did he get on Sports Illustrated to be on the cover August 3rd, 1981. Talk about that experience being on the cover of Sports Illustrated because compared to today, Sports Illustrated back then was a big publication compared to what it is today. Let's talk about that experience being on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
I think it two things. Some of the people read it and believed it, so you had an advantage. And then other people read it and they put a target on it, and they wanted to beat you. Well, if they could beat you, then they established themselves. So it was both a curse and a blessing. The hardest part was wanting to make sure my team knew that I didn't take it real serious. That I was still a member of the team, and that's all I was. I wanted to be the team and basically do my job, protect them, and make them better. And I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about us, and that was hard. Because some of the guys, they get a little, there's human nature. There are a few get a little upset about that, and so that was. But uh, I think most everybody just kind of took it with a grain of salt and said, it's just newspaper, don't worry about it," and which was fine, and that's the way you're supposed to do it. Beauty's always in the eye of the beholder. You might see a girl and think she's beautiful, might think she's ugly, vice versa. So, that's part of it. That's part of the racket.
Yeah, that 81 season was a bad season. Go 2-14. Ron Earhart, was the coach. What went wrong during that season? It's just a disaster. The season 2-14. What went wrong during that season?
Talent. Basically, we had a guy that was politicking to be the guy in charge. Dick Steinberg wanted to be the boss of the organization, and he was the player personnel guy, and he just had he didn't draft good players, and basically gave Earhart that not that good of a crop of talent to be able to coach. That being said, I think Earhart was at his strongest as an offensive coordinator. You've heard of the Peter principle, when you get promoted beyond your capabilities. But I started seeing good players being traded or not signed. They had traded Leon away. Remember that? And which destroyed our offensive line. It wasn't good. And then getting back to that Houston game, uh, let me get. We beat Miami for the first time there to win the AFC outright in '78, and that was the first time we beat them in Miami in about 10 or 15 years. That was the first time I beat them in Miami, and there were when Fairbanks had a couple of things that happened. First of all, not letting, not, Fairbanks had negotiated a contract with me and Leon in '77. And the Sullivans refused to let us sign it. Well, that was strike number one. In '78, if you remember, that's when Darryl Stingley had his neck broken.
Yeah, Jack Tatum.
Yeah, and so what most people don't realize is that Darryl was doing the same thing we were. He was playing preseason without a contract. But he had told Coach Fairbanks he wasn't going to go on the road without a contract. So the day we were catching the plane to go to Oakland, Fairbanks called him in his office and said, here's what I've got. And he says, Darryl agreed to it. And all of a sudden, so anyway, the way it happened was Darryl gets hurt, and he's got this verbal agreement. So, and after we found out that Darryl was going to be alive and not dead, Jack Sands, his attorney, called the Sullivans and said, I want to finalize that verbal agreement. The Sullivans refused to honor that agreement. A lot of people don't know that. Not only did they refuse to honor that agreement, but they went to court and basically the Sullivans said they did this for that and did that for Darryl and did this as a gift to take care of it. That's a bunch of bull crap. That was a settlement on the courtroom steps. They gave him nothing. So anyway, Fairbanks said that was it. I'm leaving here. I'm out of here in '79 or in '78. When we went down to Miami, we had two head coaches. Hank Bulla coached the defense, and Ron Earhart coached the offense. They kicked Fairbanks out of the darn locker room. The Sullivans did. And so that carried over into the Houston game. So you can understand the turmoil we had then in '78. I mean, it was the Sullivans could screw up a wet drain, man. I mean, they were awful.
Okay, so '82 rolls around. Here comes Ron Meyer. He goes to the playoffs. Before the strike short season, we set the Dolphins. But during that season, one of the more memorable games in NFL history was the 3-0 game against the Dolphins in closing conditions at Shea Stadium. The stadium worker had used a snowplow to assist John Smith to win the game with a field goal. Talk about that game. That was a very familiar game in NFL history. Talk about that.
Ron Meyer was another guy that could mess up with it. Ron Meyer knew. You took Ron Meyer's knowledge of football and put it in a thimble, it'd be me like a BB in a trash can. He knew nothing. And, and all he was public relations. He was all. And he sent the guy out there and he scraped the field. Well, the guy that scraped the field scraped it in the wrong place and actually put snow where the ball was put down. So it didn't help us one way or the other. So, I mean, Ron Meyer, he was a joke. He was just a literal joke.
Okay, so the final season in '85, you definitely turned it up, and you had a great run. You had finished third in the AFC East, but you went 11-5. Talk about the. I just want to go over the playoff games, the run to the Super Bowl. That's your final season. Talk about the Jets game. You go into the Jets, Giant Stadium against the Jets and win 26-14. Talk about that win, because really you was it had to be like the first playoff win as a player. Talk about that first win in the playoffs, correct? Because you've been in the playoffs at times, but it's your first win in the playoffs. Talk about that. Is that correct?
Well, it was a lot of fun. It was a hard-fought game. And, they had a great defensive line with, Joe Klecko and Gassineau and Salam and all those guys. And it was a hard-fought game. I remember it was a fight. But what we had that year, we had an unbelievably great defense. We had a pair of bookends with Don Blackman and Andre Tippett. That basically, if you tried to double team one of them, the other one would hit the quarterback. If you double team the other one would hit the quarterback. And we had a great defensive line, we had great linebackers, and it was just we had a much better at that time. We had a much better defense. I think our defense was better than our offense, and they came to play that day. Not only did we have a great defense, but our special teams really performed well all year too. We had a lot of great special team players and a lot of guys that made plays on the special teams.
Okay, the next thing I want to talk about divisional playoffs. Go against the at the time Los Angeles Raiders. You win 27-20. Talk about winning your second playoff win for yourself personally for the Patriots and winning 27-20 against the Raiders. Talk about that.
Well, I think it's the same thing. I mean, I think we had a couple of fumble recoveries. Had a few interceptions. We controlled the takeaways, and it enabled our offense then to have our running game and do what we needed to do. And it was just again a really, really hard-fought game. My brother Charlie was, matter of fact, playing left guard for the Raiders at that time, and it was just a knockdown drag-out, and we were able to come out on top at the end.
Okay, now you advance to the AFC Championship game, one win for the Super Bowl, and you beat your division rival, you beat the Jets in the same division. Now you beat the Dolphins, a team that was in the Super Bowl the previous year. They lost to the 49ers, that great team. You beat them 31-14. Talk about that as you go to your first Super Bowl.
I was in the rain, and it was real muddy that day. So that helped out a lot. Where you come from a cool climate like Boston, and then you go down and try to play Miami, that heat gets to you. Let me tell you, it gets to you. And because you're not in condition to play in that climate. And luckily, I think because of the rain, that helped us out a lot as far as the weather conditions. And then we were stuck with our running game, which was our offense's strong point. We could run the ball a lot better at that time than we could pass it. We stuck with our netting. We had Weathers that played a great game. Tony Collins played a great game. We just had some good running backs quarterbacks there, and our offensive line was able to make some cracks that they took advantage of.
Okay, so now you're in Super Bowl 20. And you go against a great team, Chicago Bears, that 46 defense. Obviously, your offense only had to deal with that 46 defense. Talk about getting ready for that team during that Super Bowl week in New Orleans during that time. Of course, you lose 46-10, but just talk about how great that team was, especially on the defensive side.
They had a lot of talent. You had Dave Hampton and Dave Tipton, Dan Hampton and Dave Tipton, Marshall, Denton, and they were just great players. The other thing was the concept of that defense. It was new, and nobody really understood how to protect it. Buddy Ryan found a way of saying, I can always rush one more guy than you can block. And if I man cover, I can man cover anybody for 1.5 seconds. So he would do a lot of read blitzes, and somebody stayed in. They were coming. So there was always sending one guy more than you could block. So it required a lot of fast. The quarterback had to set up, read, and throw. The other, and I'm not taking away from the talent because, like I said, they had unbelievable talent, Singletary and the rest of them. But they had an unbelievable scheme too. And if you remember, the team that beat them in the regular season, the only team that beat them was Miami.
Yeah, Monday night football.
And I don't know if you remember the game, but what they would do is Marino would back up and get it set, and all the defense then the blitzers were coming and all that. And then all of a sudden Marino would roll out of the pocket and throw the ball. Remember that? Clayton and those guys. Well, all he was doing was buying that extra 1 to 2 seconds to get those guys open on one-on-one coverage, on man coverage. So Shula figured it out before anybody else did, and he knew how to beat him. And unfortunately, more people didn't study what he did and how he countered that defense, and our coaches surely did. And and not only that, but we started out the game passing. When in essence our strength on offense was the run game, and I think we should have been more. You stick to your knit. You don't go to it. You go with what got you there, right? That's what, and we didn't do that. So that hurt us too. So it was a very embarrassing night for me, and I remember just. It wasn't a fun experience at all for me.
Yeah, that fortunately that'll be your last game. What made you want to retire and make that your final season in '85? Because it's time to move on to green pastures.
3 surgeries. I had both shoulders operated on. I played the last half of the season with 2 torn rotator cuffs. And also had a bad knee and didn't know what had happened. And when he looked at my knee, I'd torn my posterior cruciate in 1977. And when he scoped my knee, there was absolutely no cartilage left in my knee. And plus I'd stretched out my medial collateral. So the doctor called me in his office and said, you can't tell anybody I told you this. But when Bert Zarins became the orthopedic surgeon for the team in '78, I think, I'd looked at him and I said, here's what I want you to promise me, Bert. I said, if you ever see where I'm going to permanently damage myself to where I can go out with my kids and play with my kids, I want you to let me know, because I don't want to spend the rest of my life in prison. Because I'd known Bobby Orr, I saw how Bobby Orr was walking and limping around, all and doing things. And I said, I don't want to be like that. And Jim Otto had become a friend of mine, and I saw what condition Jim Otto was in. So anyway, after that, Bert called me in his office. He said, John, remember that conversation we had when I first got here? I said, I do. He said, it's that time. And I said, well, tell me what's going on. He said, well, you could play, but if you continue to play it, you won't be able to walk. We'll have to, you're not going to be able to walk. So I said, all right, Bert, that's it. And so that's why I gave it up. Basically, nobody wants to give it up, but at some point in time, you're forced to.
Okay, so 6 years later, you were inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the first Patriots to be inducted to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Talk about that experience, being the first Patriot, was you a first ballot Hall of Famer?
No.
Okay, talk about that experience.
The greatest thing about that experience was that the guy that inducted you into the Hall of Fame at that time had to be affiliated with the NFL in some way. Well, my dad had played for the New York Giants in 1951. So my dad got to induct me into the Hall of Fame. And that was a great honor for me to have my dad introduce me into the Hall of Fame. Now, as far as to me, it was a lot. Pro Bowls and All Pros, those were great awards. Don't get me wrong, but the Hall of Fame is a lifetime achievement. You know what I'm trying to say? It's a career award, and that meant a whole lot to me. Now it was a lot different back then. Now they've got all those big parties and everything else. All they had these big shindigs. My party was I went up to the hotel room. My mom, my dad, and my high school coach were there. We sat around and drank Coca-Colas and talked. And that was our big party back in those days.
All right, last question. Ray Guy, unfortunately, passed away a few weeks ago. He's probably the same draft class, correct? 1973.
Yep.
Right,
Played
for
against the Southern Miss.
Yeah. For those not familiar with him, those listening, Big Out listeners, talk about how great Ray Guy was. He's the greatest punter ever. The field position, the hang time. Talk about the importance of having a punter, and obviously the ones you were offensive lineman. That's usually taken for granted because they always talk about the quarterback, running back, wide receivers. You played on a just as important position because you make things go. The offensive line got to block, they got to pass protect. Just talk about the necessity of having a punter and of being an offensive lineman because that's what makes it go. Good position and blocking and protecting the quarterback.
Well, I'm going to tell you a story about Alabama when we played it when it was at Mississippi Southern. And Ray and I got to be good friends later on. And I liked Ray. I really liked Ray. He was a character. And he played defensive back with a safety. And he'd light you up too. Now, let me tell you, he'd light you up in college ball. And, but anyway, we were in the wishbone. And we got the ball on our own 20, and we would run like a 13-play drive and get it down to about their 20, and then something would go wrong. We'd either fumble it or we'd miss a field goal or we did something. And he'd get back there. Basically, he's standing on the 10-yard line when he's punting. Now we have to go all the way back to our 10 or 15-yard line and drive another 85 yards in a wishbone, right? 4 yards in a cloud of dust, and try to score again. So we have another 14-play drive. Something go on. And Coach Bryant chewed our rear end off at halftime. But Ray Guy was the guy that did it because it's hard to have a 12, 14-play drive without any mistakes. And most quarterbacks can't do with his hands. So Ray Guy was a game changer when it came to the kicking game. And not only that, but he wasn't your normal kicker. You know, he didn't have to sit at the end of the bench because he was kind of different. You know what I mean? He wasn't different. He was one of the guys. He was tough as nails. You know, he made a lot of tackles on that punt team, and I think he kind of missed playing DB and getting back there forcing that run. So I really think he was a tough nut. Good guy.
Yeah, again, elaborate more on like an offensive line, Hall of Fame offensive lineman, because that's very important. Because it gets kind of glamorous. You got 300 plus guys blocking, but talk about the importance of being an offensive lineman, because that's what this is important as a quarterback. Talk about that.
Well, it is. The modern day game is a lot different. You know, and because the offensive linemen are more or less, it seems like they kind of grab a hold of a guy and they just kind of stay in contact with him, and the back kind of finds the hole. But when we were playing, offensive linemen actually created the hole. And, there was a lot of respect between offensive linemen and running backs because we knew they had defined the hole, and we knew we had to create the hole. And so there was a lot of respect there. And there, on the passing game, with the pocket and all, there's a lot of things there that, there's, I don't know if you saw The Blind Side or anything like that, but there is a truth in that film, in that offensive linemen have a protective attitude. It's very unselfish. They want to take care of other people, and they do. And that's our job. And it would break my heart if I let a guy get through and hit ropes. And I'd feel sorry about it. And because I knew what a tough guy he was, and I'd get mad at him sometimes because I'd say, Gross, I can only keep this guy out 3 seconds. I said, you got to get rid of the ball. He says, yeah, but I got to give Stanley time to get over. And so he's willing to take that blow to get that extra time. But so there was that respect between the two of them, between the offensive lineman and the quarterback. Not only that, but back then we ran a lot of sweeps. And there was a lot of coordination. People don't realize this, but one of the things that, I tell people I wasn't a great pull blocker. I said all I had to do was run. And because I'd run, and basically the back would be in my hip pocket. And what he would do is he would see the field and he would set me up. In other words, he might move to my right hip, which would force that defensive back or linebacker to move to the outside, so I could hit him and stiff arm him, basically, and then the back would come back to my left hip, and then I could keep running and go make a second block. But it wasn't me, it was the back, because the back set it all up. And so there's a lot more teamwork when we played than there is today. It's much more individualistic than in today's game. Is that the answer you were kind of looking for?
Yeah, just the nuances, the points of the offensive line, because again, he gets overshadowed by the quarterback, running back, and the wide receivers. They're the glamorous positions, and the offensive line is not glamorous.
Have you seen Alabama play this year?
Yeah, I've been watching Alabama. Yeah, I watched it yesterday. Yeah, I watched it.
All right. They got a great quarterback, don't they?
Yeah, Bryce Young.
Yeah, a great quarterback. They got a good running back, Gibbs, too, don't they?
Yeah.
Are they as productive as they need to be?
No.
Why?
I have the offensive line.
Don't have an offensive line.
fluency.
So there, that tells you that you can have all the skill positions you want, but if you don't have that offensive line to make those holes or to provide that protection where the quarterback doesn't have to run around for his life, it ain't gonna happen. Period.
Yeah, penalties too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, offsides, holding, everything. I mean, it's just, and that's where Alabama. They've got a great quarterback. They got a good running back. They got average receivers, but their offensive line really is bad. I mean, they're not that good. Now, whether it's coaching or whether it's talent, I don't know, but they aren't producing. Let's put it that way.
One more thing before I let you go. Saban and Bryant. Is there similarities with Saban? Does he remind you of Bryant? Coach Bill Bryant?
No.
Okay.
Not very different.
Uh,
Very different. Bryant would take what he had and turn them into ball players. You've heard the story of Coach Bryant and all the things he put his players through. I mean, the week before we played Southern Cal my sophomore year when they beat us so bad, he said on the Saturday before we played that game, Coach Bryant sent 10 people to the hospital with heat stroke and dehydration.
Yeah.
That's how hard practice was. And he comes in the next day and he said, "Well, boys, y'all learned a big lesson yesterday." He said, "You'll push yourself and think you're going to die. But the human body's an amazing machine. It'll always pass out before it dies." And that's what he thought. And it was a great lesson to learn, but I don't want to have to learn it again. One time's enough for me. That was a terrible day. But it taught you a lesson. And, people, you see all these guys now holding up four fingers for the fourth quarter and all that stuff. Coach Bryant started that. And the boys that hold up their fingers now do not understand what that means. What that means is we've worked harder, we paid a bigger price than that other team, and it's the fourth quarter now, and it means more to us than it does to them. That's what it means, because we've worked harder than them, and it means more. And that's the way Coach Bryant believes. Saban is the best recruiter, has been the best recruiter that I've ever seen. He gets more talent than any coach in the NCAA. How he does it, I don't know, but he does it. And I think he's gotten good coaches. So I think his big thing is gathering talent. Whereas Coach Bryant did so much depend on, he wanted talent, don't get me wrong, he liked talent too. But he took what he had and he made them. And that's the difference.
That's a good contrast, compare and contrast. Yeah, it's different. Okay, so the Junction Boys. That's that. There was a movie about that. Brian, the way he treated the player, Junction Boys, right? That was the name of the movie.
Yeah.
Things like that. Yeah. All right, man. Thank you for your time.
One more story. My Uncle Bill was in Alabama in 1957 when Coach Bryant came. And they practiced behind Old Freeman Hall, which is the dormitory at the university. And one day they went out to practice, and there was this big wire fence all the way around the practice field. And everybody said, "Well, Coach Bryant built a wire fence so the fans couldn't get in and disturb practice." Players said, "No, he built that fence so they could keep the players in." Because there's so many quitting. So that's who Coach Bryant was.
Man, it's been a pleasure, man, having you on the show. This is a monumental moment for the show. I never had a Pro Football Hall of Famer. I didn't feel a lot of NFL players, but now a Hall of Famer like yourself. I appreciate your stories, man. Thank you for coming on. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate your invite. Sorry I missed last week.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you that you came on today. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's the one and only John Hanna, Pro Football Hall of Famer, 1991. As a New England Patriot, he made his career with the Patriots from 1973, 1975. Played with the University of Alabama. Did his thing. It's a great interview, man. It's a monumental moment for the Rashad show. He did a Pro Football Hall of Famer, man. That's amazing. Great story. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Take 4 music breaks. So it's coming.